China continues holding military exercises surrounding Taiwan with warplanes and ships crossing the median line in the Taiwan Strait. Beijing vows to halt cooperation with Washington on various issues following the U.S. House Speaker's visit to Taiwan. The People Power Party convened a standing National Committee meeting. If it's decided the current leadership vacuum is viewed as a party emergency, the ruling bloc will move to switch to an emergency leadership system. Hello, we'll be wrapping up the week well. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. South Korea's first lunar orbiter was successfully launched from Cape Canaveral on board a SpaceX rocket. Danuri is expected to be on course to arrive at the moon later this year. Haenyeo starts us off.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
August 5th is now a historic day for South Korea, particularly for its deep space exploration, as its first homegrown lunar orbiter, Danuri, has successfully blasted off to space.
다누리는 60여 분이 지난 오전 8시 48분경 발사체와 정상적으로 분리되었으며 달을 향한 궤도에 성공적으로 진입하였음을 말씀드립니다. 오늘 달을 향한 첫걸음을 성공적으로 내디딜 수 있어 매우 기쁘게 생각합니다.
And this is how it all happened. Danuri's journey began with the launch from Cape Canaveral in Florida. At exactly 8:08 a.m. Korea time, it soared up to the sky on board SpaceX's Falcon 9 carrier rocket. Then at around 9 a.m., officials said it made it 1,655 kilometers away from Earth. That's where it separated from the rocket it was attached to. It detached at speeds of 10.15 kilometers per second at an altitude of 703 kilometers. Then, at around 9:40 a.m., researchers at Korea Aerospace Research Institute heard some great news. Danuri reportedly made contact with NASA's Deep Space Antenna in Canberra, Australia. It had opened its solar panels for the power needed to send a signal to the ground station on Earth. The connection was made successfully, so now we're heading for the third stage, which will happen overnight. The ground station will position Danuri so that it faces antennas on Earth. They'll also be activating different devices on the orbiter. Then on Sunday, it will be getting ready to enter a trajectory that will take it to its target orbit. It will take some time, though. We'll have to wait another 4 months before it actually gets near the moon. By December 16th, Danuri will finally enter lunar orbit. It will go in circles around the moon until it reaches an orbit of 100 kilometers above the lunar surface. Officials believe it will be around late December when the KPLO reaches this point and is then ready to conduct a range of studies for a whole year. 신예은, Arirang News.
One of Danuri's key features is using gravity to propel it to the desired destination. This greatly extends travel time while helping to save fuel, crucial factors in accomplishing the mission. Kim Jong-sil explains further.
Normally, it takes as little as 3 days to get to the moon, but Danuri is looking at a journey of about 4.5 months. Why? It's because the orbiter will use a more energy-efficient method of travel.
The trajectory used for the Danuri, called as the ballistic lunar transfer (BLT), is an energy-efficient one.
This BLT method is the key to Danuri's successful lunar mission. And it's so difficult that no other countries apart from the U.S. and Japan have attempted it. The route will take Danuri first some 1.56 million kilometers in the direction of the sun before it loops back around the Earth to enter a trajectory toward the moon around December 16th. This way, Danuri can make fuel savings of 20 to 25%, a precious amount in the depths of space. Scientists at the Korea Aerospace Research Institute originally designed Danuri to make 3.5 rotations of the Earth for a shorter trip. But as Danuri was being built, it became much heavier than planned. If Danuri had reached the moon with no fuel, it wouldn't have been able to conduct any of its mission. So officials chose to use gravity to propel the orbiter instead. On its journey, Danuri will draw a giant ribbon-like figure and fly about 6 million kilometers. That's about 15 times the distance between the moon and Earth, which is about 380,000 kilometers. Danuri will begin to slow down from December 16th before entering its target orbit 100 kilometers above the moon's surface. Authorities expect that at least 9 trajectory adjustments will need to be made before its mission begins. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, as China continues to hold military exercises, reportedly several warplanes and ships crossed the median line in the Taiwan Strait. In response to concerns raised by the international community, a foreign ministry spokesperson announced Beijing won't accept any attempts of suppression and also highlighted that China isn't the same as 120 years ago when it was humiliated and bullied. The live firing drills began after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan earlier this week. Pelosi is now in Japan on the final leg of her Asia trip. The House Speaker met with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The two agreed to strengthen bilateral ties and work to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Min Soo-kyun shares with us what was discussed.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi met with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida Friday morning. And at the top of their agenda was, of course, bilateral ties and their commitment to ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific.
We spoke about strengthening the Japan-U.S. alliance and a free and open Indo-Pacific. In order to realize this, I asked U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Pelosi for her leadership, and we expect support from the U.S. Congress.
Kishida told reporters that the two also agreed to work closely to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. He said China's behavior raised serious concerns for the region, stressing that Tokyo had urged Beijing to call off its military exercises near Taiwan. In a press briefing, Pelosi also made it clear that her recent visit to Taiwan was not about changing the status quo in Asia.
We have said from the start that our representation here is not about changing the status quo here in Asia, changing the status quo in Taiwan. It's about, again, the Taiwan Relations Act, the U.S. China policy, all of the pieces of legislation and agreements that have established what our relationship is, to have peace in the Taiwan Straits and to have the status quo prevail.
Pelosi and Kishida's meeting comes after China fired missiles near Taiwan during its military drills the previous day. The exercises, which included firing ballistic missiles and deploying fighter jets, follow Pelosi's visit to Taiwan earlier this week. Pelosi also said the U.S. will not allow China to prevent U.S. officials from traveling to Taiwan. Her trip to the island was a first by a top-level U.S. official in 25 years. Meanwhile, China on Friday decided to sanction Pelosi and her immediate family in response to the visit to Taiwan. In a statement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said despite its grave concerns and firm opposition, Pelosi insisted on visiting the region, undermining China's sovereignty and trampling on the One China policy. The ministry, however, did not specify the details of the sanction. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
China vows to halt various coordination with the U.S. after Pelosi visited Taiwan. The announcement came after Beijing called the trip vicious and provocative actions. Our Kim Dami is standing by on the line with the details. Dami, do fill us in.
Sure, Daniel. China is suspending cooperation with the U.S. from climate talks to dialogue between senior-level military commanders in retaliation to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan this week. But this comes as a little surprise as Beijing has already warned it would slap sanctions on Pelosi. The retaliation also includes suspending cooperation on repatriation of illegal immigrants, criminal justice, and combating drug issues. At a news conference in Tokyo on Friday, Pelosi once again struck a defiant tone, stressing that China has sought to isolate Taiwan from the international community. That's also in line with what the U.S. top diplomat Antony Blinken said at the ASEAN Regional Forum in Cambodia the same day. He slammed the Chinese government, saying its firing of missiles during military drills around Taiwan was an unjustified escalation.
And Seoul's foreign minister also had a similar message regarding the instability in the region. What's South Korea's exact stance on the issue?
So So Seoul's top diplomat Park Jin said unilateral changes to the status quo by force will be unacceptable in regards to the latest Taiwan issue. Also coming from the ASEAN-related foreign ministers meeting on Friday, this is a rare vocal message from a South Korean official, considering such expressions normally come out of Washington and Tokyo regarding issues involving Beijing and Moscow. While making clear that South Korea supports Beijing's One China policy, Park underlined that peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait are essential to the regional security and prosperity. According to Park, escalating tensions in the region will have a negative impact on peace and stability on the Korean peninsula, especially on top of North Korea's growing security threats. This is all I have. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, Tommy, thank you for being out there for us. We appreciate it. Moving on to other stories now, the nation's top diplomat has been invited to talks in Qingdao by his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. The duo will discuss matters of mutual interest ranging from bilateral ties in North Korea as well as issues related to the broader region. Park Jin's 3-day trip will begin next Monday. He's also scheduled to host virtual talks with the Korean business community there. The foreign ministers met ahead of the 30th anniversary of bilateral diplomatic ties on August 24th. According to a UN report, North Korea has been focused on preparations to conduct a nuke test. While attending the East Asia Summit, Seoul's top diplomat reportedly expressed concerns over the matter while speaking to his Russian counterpart. Bae Eun-ji fills us in.
North Korea was recently seen preparing for a nuclear test for the first time in almost 5 years. Citing an excerpt of a confidential UN report, Reuters reported Thursday that North Korea made preparations for a nuclear test during the first 6 months of this year. It also reported that work at the Punggye-ri nuclear test site paves the way for additional nuclear tests and for the possible development of nuclear weapons. Punggye-ri is the only known nuclear test site in North Korea. 6 tests were carried out there between 2006 and 2017. But in May 2018, it was shut down and blown up after the regime's leader Kim Jong-un promised to halt all nuclear tests. But recent satellite images show the regime restoring one of the site's tunnels. Both South Korean and U.S. officials have been warning that a North Korean nuclear test could be imminent. Meanwhile, at the East Asia Summit held in Cambodia, South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin on Friday was seated next to his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. Park expressed concerns about heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula and the possibility of North Korea conducting its 7th nuclear test. In response, Lavrov said Russia is closely monitoring the situation in the north, using different methods, including satellites. The East Asia Summit is a meeting that brings together top diplomats from 27 countries, including South Korea, the U.S., China, Japan, Russia, and ASEAN countries. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
The People Power Party moves to declare a party emergency. This paves the way for the ruling bloc to launch a leadership system that will ensure suspended Chairman Icheon automatically lose his post. Icheon has the latest.
South Korea's ruling People Power Party has now officially laid the foundations to switch to an emergency leadership system. The party convened a standing national committee meeting on Friday to discuss whether its current leadership vacuum that was sparked by the suspension of its party chair Lee Jun-seok is considered a party emergency, the key requirement to launch such a system.
I ask you to decide whether the current acting chair system resulting from the chairman's suspension and the resignations of Supreme Council members that makes him virtually unable to function is deemed an emergency.
Though not strictly falling in line with party rules, more than the majority of the members in attendance voted in favor. The decision follows previous decisions by the central leadership, which expressed concern over the crisis amid declining party and the president approval ratings.
We are very concerned our internal issues broke out when we are supposed to be backing the government in its early days.
Next, the committee revised party rules to enable an acting chair to appoint an emergency leadership, not only in the event of a vacancy, but also a suspension. So, full leader and acting chair Kwon Song-dong will be appointing the interim leader instead of the suspended Chairman Lee. Once the interim leadership is launched, Chairman Lee would automatically lose his post. 2 members proposed their joint revisions to preserve his post but failed to gain majority support. Finally, the committee approved holding a national committee meeting next Tuesday, where some 1,000 members will vote on the revised party rule and the appointment of the interim leader. Once approved, the emergency leadership could take office by mid-August at the latest, but it remains to be seen whether they could get off to a smooth start, as that could depend on how Chairman Icheon and his allies respond to the decision. 이경은, Arirang News.
The nation's daily COVID-19 tally exceeded 100,000 again. The number of severely ill patients reached the highest in nearly 3 months. Authorities have secured more hospital beds and expanded the availability of PCR tests. Shin Se-byuk brings the updates.
South Korea on Friday reported 122,901 new COVID-19 cases, the tally remaining above 100,000 for the fourth straight day. The number of critically ill patients rose by 10 from the previous day to 320, the highest in almost 80 days. 47 more people died, raising the death toll to 25,191. The fatality rate remains at 0.12%, the lowest among OECD countries. To better manage this new wave of infections, the government pledged to secure almost 1,500 more beds amid anticipated increases in the number of critically ill patients. On Friday, the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters said some 1,100 have been secured nationwide. With this, now there are almost 7,000 beds available at 326 hospitals across the country. There are some major changes in South Korea's COVID-19 measures, too. To start with, same-day PCR test appointments will be available again starting Monday, the 8th. With the new system in place, virus test takers can reserve a test via text message or on a mobile app and get tested the same day. Another change is the resumption of the preemptive COVID-19 test for new military conscripts after a suspension of 2.5 months to prevent mass infections at boot camps. Tests will be free of charge at public health centers within 3 days before joining the military and will be available for those who join the military on August 16th or after. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
A fire that broke out in a 4-story building in Icheon, Gyeonggi-do province killed 5 people and injured 44 others. The blaze started at 10:17 a.m. local time on the 3rd floor where construction work was underway. Most of the casualties were among patients at a kidney dialysis clinic on the floor above, older people who had difficulty moving. There were 33 patients at the time and 13 medical staff. The police plan to dispatch a team of 70 people to conduct investigations. President Yoon Suk-yeol instructed the Interior Minister to take measures to prevent such accidents from happening again and to ensure the injured receive proper care. In June, South Korea posted a current account surplus for the second straight month. It was also in the black for the first half. The surpluses were smaller due to the rising cost of energy compared to last year. Jung helps us look beyond the digits.
South Korea logged a current account surplus in June for the second straight month. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday showed that the balance of trade in June came to a surplus of $5.61 billion. But the surplus was smaller than it was a year earlier. A Bank of Korea official says that's because growth in exports was offset by increased imports on the back of the higher cost of fuel and commodities.
The goods account surplus has decreased from $7.5 billion in June last year to $3.6 billion this year as continued growth in imports surpassed that of exports.
Growth of goods exports was led by petroleum products with a more than 9% rise compared to the previous year, recording an on-year increase for 20 months in a row. But the bank said due to the slowdown of exports to the country's biggest trading partner, China, it plunged from the nearly 40% growth recorded in the same period a year earlier. The Bank of Korea also attributed the on-year decrease of the current account surplus to the 19% rise in imports of goods. Amid the global supply chain bottleneck and the war in Ukraine, commodities imports rose nearly 29%, with coal skyrocketing almost 190% and crude oil up more than 53%.
But an expert says although commodity prices in July have been settling down, the trade surplus is likely to decline further with fears of global economic recession.
One of the most important reasons for the decline in the commodities account is because first, the slowdown in export to China on the one hand, and the other, the global slowdown in trade due to higher interest rate and reduction in economic growth. So I think it is very difficult to avoid that long-term trend, and the government has to do something in order to prevent further deepening.
엄지영, Arirang News.
The women divers of Jeju are known for collecting seafood from underwater without the assistance of sophisticated gear by just holding their breath. Today, the changing marine environment is posing a threat to the Haenyeo culture, but there are people working hard to preserve this tradition. Icheon has the full story.
In the sea surrounding South Korea's southernmost island, there are women who follow the rules of nature to make a living. They are known as the Haenyeo, or literally sea women of Jeju Island, who harvest seafood from underwater while holding their breath. Without the assistance of oxygen tanks, Haenyeo can only collect as many sea creatures as their breath or swim allows. They also limit the size of their catch, like abalone, conch, and sea urchins, to preserve the ecosystem. However, the profession is failing to attract young people to replenish its ranks. The number of Haenyeo on Jeju has shrunk from 14,000 in the 1970s to a little over 3,400 in 2021. The average diver is now older than 70. To preserve the dying tradition, Jeju City founded a school in 2008 to train young Haenyeo divers. At Hansupul Haenyeo School, students learn how to hold their breath for long periods and harvest seafood. I decided to take a dive with the students in one of their practice sessions. Haenyeo always move in a group for safety, and so do the trainees. Each Haenyeo has a partner called a mulbot, or water friend, who monitors their condition underwater.
Hi, this is my mulbot for today, who will be watching my dive and come to my rescue whenever I have a problem.
They let each other know when they spot a potential catch.
여기 속에 닿는 데 있어요, 가운데. 아, 네. 나중에 가서 까봐요. 네. 짧게 있어요.
Successful catches are celebrated together.
옵쟁이 잡았어?
And harvests are shared among the group. But the water doesn't only hold sea creatures. It also contains waste. Marine pollution and fast-changing sea temperatures due to global warming have put the lives of Haenyeos at risk in recent years. The types of catchable seafood have changed, and many divers have lost their lives due to being caught underwater by abandoned nets, hooks, and plastics. Haenyeo say they directly feel such changes in the marine environment.
Each year, urchin barren is worsening and other sea life is disappearing. I feel sad and burdened for my junior and future Haenyeo.
To preserve the culture and history of Haenyeo, regional governments are providing financial incentives for new Haenyeo. They also support medical care for active and retired Haenyeo. Despite the efforts, however, experts say that priority should be preserving sea resources.
We should work to establish a system for Haenyeo to keep being able to catch sea creatures in their harvesting grounds.
A Haenyeo with 35 years of experience, Kang Hae-sim, agrees.
I think the regional leadership should work to prevent or minimize pollution. The sea is like my mother, my husband, and my child, something that I cannot exist without.
Being a Haenyeo is more than a job. It's a way of life that sustains the environment and upholds a culture of solidarity that will require continuous effort to preserve. 이시후, 아리랑 뉴스, 제주.
Tropical nights and the heat wave will continue this weekend. Tomorrow, daytime highs in Seoul will be hiking up to 32 degrees Celsius, but sensible temperatures will be nearing 34 degrees. This is due to the hot and moist air created by the frequent showers. For places like Daegu, temperatures will be feeling close to 37 degrees. To avoid any heat-related illnesses, drink plenty of water and avoid outdoor activities. The entire nation will see scattered outbreaks of rain this weekend. It may look like it's not going to rain when heading outside, but sudden showers and even local downpours are possible. Expect about 5 to 60 millimeters of rainfall, and thunder and lightning may follow at times. Most parts of the country will see tropical nights. Lows in Seoul and Daejeon will be kicking off at 27 degrees. Showers will become more widespread during the daytime. Daily highs in Seoul and Gwangju will reach 32. Daegu 36 and Gyeongju will be making it to 37 degrees. Central regions, including the capital, will have long spells of showers next week. Have a great weekend and hear the weather conditions around the world.
It's time to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.